Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Are you ready to pop your cork? In the left corner at 6'4", 242 pounds, with a record of 45-0, the undisputed.
Hey, Michael.
Hey, Will.
Hey, how many bottles of wine have you had?
Well, Will, it's not the wine. I'm just so excited about the podcast.
Yeah, I am too. But this is not a boxing match. This is We Know Texas Vino.
Salute.
Welcome all you Texas wine lovers. I'm your host, Will. We have a very special episode today, and we're sitting here in Grapevine with Paul Mitchell Bonarrigo. And let me tell you something. Before I met you at Twigga, I could not get your last name right until you came and saw me and corrected me multiple times. So we're at Messna Hof, and we actually have some super special guests today. So this week, right now, we're getting ready to record getting ready for Grape Fest this week. And so we actually have a couple of very special Australian wineries here. And first, we're going to start with Dean. Correct me if I'm wrong. Hewitson.
Hewitson, perfect.
Man, I'm so good. English is my fourth language.
Your accent is great.
Awesome. Appreciate yours is too. And then we have Vanessa Lambert, which yours is easy because we have Miranda Lambert, so from the Lambert Estates. And then we got Hewitson Winery here. I appreciate y'all coming on the show here. It's an honor to have y'all here. I've heard a lot of good stuff about y'all. Done a lot of research on y'all. Very interesting about you, though. So, real quick, Paul, let our listeners know what we're drinking right this second.
So, we're starting off with our Bonarrigo Family Heritage Select, which is a tier of our wines that focuses on Italian varietals. Mm-hmm. And this is a blend of Trebbiano and Pinot Grigio from the Texas High Plains.
And it's an amazing. I've never actually had this kind of blend before, and it's actually really good. I mean, it's a definitely unusual, crisp finish on the end of it. I love it.
Yes, it's meant to be very refreshing, especially on a nice warm summer day in Texas. Yes.
Like today.
Yes.
I didn't realize you had any of those.
Oh yeah, just a couple.
Now this has actually got a cold front that just came in. And for the record, I actually harvested grapes the other day, and it was 126 degrees outside.
Oh my God!
Whoa.
I lost 500 pounds. Real quick, I'm gonna hit my social medias. So you can find us on Facebook at We Know Texas Vino, and you can also find us out on the web at weknowtexasvino.wine and .com. You can find this podcast on any podcasting platform, and when you find it, give us a 5-star rating and give us some good feedback. We love to hear what we're doing right and where you want us to go next. So we love having the feedback. So you're listening to episode 78 of We Know Texas Vino. We're here at Grapevine, Texas at Messna Hof. And again, welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
So real quick, we're going to start because since he's hosting the place, we're going to start with Paul, okay? So Paul, 1977, Paul and Merrill had a dream. Can you tell us about that dream?
Well, technically they did not have a dream in 1977, but because they really fell into this industry, as did many, but they fell in love with it, and then the dream formed from there. So, my dad was a physical therapist, grew up in the Bronx, New York, eventually made his way to Bryan, Texas. My mom grew up in Bryan, went to Texas A&M. They met, got married, bought a property that was not meant for grapes at the time. And basically that was just their homestead, and just happened that same year that my dad was one of his patients was Ron Perry from Texas A&M doing a grape feasibility study, trying to determine what grapes would grow well in Texas, because they had all this data from TV Munson from when he, helped fix phylloxera in Europe. But most of those were native vines or rootstock vines, not Vitis vinifera. And so this study was really pivotal for the next 30 years of Texas wine to really determine where we should grow and what we should grow.
Right.
So my parents, they got involved with the study. They found a lot of passion with making the wine. And of course we have the heritage in the Bonarrigo side of our family of making wine for 7 generations. And so my dad said, let's give this a shot. Started making some wine, got some awards, and really kicked it off from there. So they just continued to grow. They were one of the early pioneers, third winery in the state, and continued to really push Texas wine, not just in Texas, but nationally, internationally. And that, I would say that the dream came into play in the 80s when they realized this could be a thing.
Right.
Like once they realized that this was not just a pet project, that this is a whole industry that could become reality.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And one of the really interesting facts that I read online, that y'all had 1 acre, and that 1 acre had 55 different varietals on it. So that's a lot for 1 acre.
Yeah, it's the whole, you throw it against the wall and you see what sticks. That was literally how they started. From that original planting on the estate, because of where the estate is, Lenoir, which is a native grape of Texas, did thrive there and did well. And so that's what wound up being the main planting at the estate vineyard.
Right.
But each one of those experimental vineyards had a different selection of varietals that performed well. But in ours particularly, it was Lenoir.
Awesome. Interesting. So what was the actual turning point that Paul and Merrill actually said, this is something we're going to actually do? I mean, there's got to be that one. Everybody always has that one little tipping point that says, yeah, well, this is something that we're going to do. We're going to win a lot of awards. We're going to make some of the best grapes, yada, yada, yada. What was that turning point?
Well, early on, the turning point was they won a blue ribbon to the state fair with their first hobby wine that they made. And so that was I would say that was more of a head scratcher, this is interesting. And then they started getting recognition from a few other competitions that were going. There was there's been a vibrant wine community in Texas for a long time, but it's just, mostly imports and things like that. But the Knights of the Vine, for example, was a community that really embraced my parents very early on. And as they started getting that feedback, and as they started seeing the passion for a Texas industry, I would say that's what started to light the fire. And then by the time they entered into distribution in 1987, they saw so much growth opportunity at that time. So that was probably the two big ones.
Right. And, when I was reading about the history, in fact, we could probably do a second full episode just on Messna Hof. There's just so much rich history there. And I always like to do the research to find out what's going on. And when I type Messna Hof and then Paul Bonarrigo, Merrill Bonarrigo in there, I get an endless pages at the very bottom. In fact, at the very bottom it says to be continued at the very bottom, Google. So we're going to switch gears real quick. We're going to go over here to Vanessa. So I'm going to start it like this, and you're going to tell the story, okay? I'm going to let you fill in all the blanks. So you're from Peru.
I am.
And you ended up in Australia.
Yes, I did. That was a long way there.
That's a long swim.
Yes.
So how did you end up going from Peru to Australia and then becoming a winemaker?
So when I was deciding where I was going to go to university, I wanted to study chemistry. So I had already lived in the U.S. My dad is in mining, so he did projects, and we moved around a little bit. So I'd already lived in the U.S. I had that experience, so I wanted to see more. Canada was way too cold. Ireland and Scotland seemed to just be not very understandable. Not that Australia is much different. My sister was studying in England at Cambridge at the time, so I couldn't just get up and follow her. So I had to go somewhere different. And I ended up actually applying and ended up studying in New Zealand because there was a program that I liked that was a medicinal chemistry program. And it was a simple way that Lima, Santiago, Auckland. It was a very straight trip there. So I thought, well, that's pretty easy.
You had a comment to say there because the way you looked away.
A long way.
Yes, a very long way, but a very straight way, or across. So I ended up going to New Zealand and studied chemistry in Auckland at Auckland University. And when I finished, my parents just happened to have moved by then to Australia, to Adelaide. So I had decided that I wanted to do a master's in perfumery. Back then I wanted to be a perfumer.
Okay, wait a minute. Hold still. You said you want to do perfumes.
Yes.
And she does grapes and wine now?
Well, you can drink it. It's a bit funner.
Spray on the grapes, the perfume on it.
I left that idea back then. I haven't made perfume.
Okay.
So I went to Australia just to wait until I could apply to this master's program that I had found in France. And we just one night happened to be out with friends having dinner, and I happened to sit next to this lady that we were chatting, and she was hearing my story and what I wanted to do, and she looked confused, and she's like, "Why don't you study winemaking?" And I was like, what do you mean study winemaking? You can study winemaking. I had always had this perception that it was something that, your family's into it and you inherit the knowledge from them and you learn, and it's just a generational thing. I didn't realize, and maybe this was very ignorant of me.
Trust me, I had the same feeling too. Okay, trust me. So,
but I mean, we grew up, my parents, I didn't grow up drinking wine, but it was always on the table. It was always part of family life and entertaining and just life and friends. So it's not like wine was a foreign concept, but just the idea that you could educate yourself in this and do this. And I was super confused. I went home that night and I looked into it and I was like, oh my God, that sounds exactly like what I want to do. And my sister was like, hey, you can't just jump into a master's because you've read some stuff. You should go work and work in the industry. And I was like, I know this is exactly what I want to do. So I contacted the university. I don't know how or why I felt that intensely about it, but I contacted the university. Applications had already closed and it was close to the Christmas break. So I asked if I could apply, explained that I had a chemistry background, and they said, yep, send us your application by Friday. So yep, the next day I sent the application. They accepted me, and in June, July, I started my Master's of Enology at the University of Adelaide.
Wow. That's interesting. We're going to go from perfume to making wine.
Well, it's very similar. Organoleptic, it's all about the smell and, not
aromas.
the taste. Yeah, aromas. There's a lot of similarities. I mean, you could drink perfume, I guess, if you really wanted to, but I wouldn't recommend it.
It's got alcohol in it.
So my wife has this thing. So she loves the way wine smells. She would love to make perfume out of the smell of certain varieties. So that could be a whole line of perfumes.
Oh, yeah.
Like Petit Syrah,
Yeah.
Petit Verdot.
There you go.
Very nice.
There's a business plan.
I want to smell like Viognier today.
Exactly. Yeah.
So now we're going to switch over here to Dean. Dean, AKA the Mad Hatter.
Oh, yeah. That's an odd.
Here's the hard thing. Okay, I found information about Vanessa online, and I found a bunch of information about Bonarrigos, but I can't find nothing about you. It's like you don't exist.
No, keep a very low profile.
I see that. I want to start with this one thing I did find on your website. I really did like this quote. Great wines are the expression of the soils they are grown in and in the seasons they grow. Through knowledge and experience, we explore exciting new representations of traditional varietals and blends. That's probably one of my most favorite quotes, and I'm actually going to put that on a mug and walk around with that. It's going to take up like 90% of the mug.
A stein, you mean? Like a beer stein.
Ooh, don't get me started on that there. But okay, so like literally, I searched, and I'm an IT guy, and I could find things on people that shouldn't be found. I can't find nothing on you. Like you don't exist. So tell me first off, why do you not exist? And how are you sitting here in this chair?
Well, that's
and then how did you get into making wine?
yeah. Well, that's fortunate that you don't read all the stuff that I used to get up to. Hence my nickname, the Hatter, and then the Mad Hatter. But I think my friends were more crazy than me. So that's all good. But how I got into wine, I was born in 1965, and in the 60s, Australia transitioned out of drinking port, sherries, fortified wines into table wines. There was the red wine boom of the 60s, closely followed by the white wine boom of the 70s. And my mum and dad, not that I knew about that at the time, but my mum and dad did, and their friends did. And all Australians started getting into table wines. And it was also popular to plant a vineyard. And my mum and dad, along with friends, planted a small vineyard. So by the time I was 5 years old, I was picking grapes, planting vines, and generally collecting their empty bottles, their labels, soaking their labels off their empty bottles on Sunday mornings in a bucket of water and putting them in a scrapbook. So that was my...
Do you still have that book?
I wish I did. We were talking about this because those labels back then were just old school European copies.
Okay.
And there was no laws about what you called a wine. So in Australia, if it was a soft red wine, we called it a Burgundy. If it was a stronger red wine, we called it a Claret. If it was a dry white wine, we called it maybe it was a dry white wine, lighter wine, we called it a Rhine Riesling. And it was a full-bodied white wine. We called it a white Burgundy, and that's what people drank. And then the world changed.
Okay.
So the laws came in, But this was an unbelievable time in Australian wine, and I was sort of a little kid watching this on the sidelines, which was a lot of fun. Anyway, so that gave me an introduction, an inkling that there was such an industry in wine. That particular vineyard of my parents and their friends, there was a glut, obviously, some years later, everyone planting grapes. There was a glut, and the government paid people to pull out vineyards that maybe shouldn't be there. So mum and dad and their friends, this vineyard got pulled out. But nevertheless, it did give me the inspiration to get into the wine industry. So I left school and signed up for college learning wine.
That's very interesting. So see, we have 3 different people here, 3 different ways they got into wine. We got one that's family. We got one that wanted to be doing perfume, which still cracks me up. I'm sorry. And then we got one that just started doing it as a child. That's interesting. That's what, to me, I think people want to hear about. How did you get into it, and why did you get into it? And to me, that's just fascinating. Now, one of the things that cracked me up, you just talk about the different names y'all have for the wine and stuff. And I just so happened did a little bit of research about Australia and how they named their wines. And so we're going to start with some of those right quick. Okay. So.
Is this a test?
Yes, this is a test. So one of them was Fair Dunkum.
Fair
Dinkum.
Fair Dinkum. That's great.
Let's talk about that one real quick.
Well, I'm sure that would be a good wine.
So let me, for our listeners out there, this is a term used to describe a good genuine wine that seems true to be grown in the growing region.
Fair dinkum.
And this one right here actually cracks me up, because when I say this, Paul, you'll know when I use the term, we have a different term here in the States for it. Splash of fruit. Okay. The term is used to describe a wine that is showing a lot of big fruit. And what do we call it here in the States? Fruit forward or jammy?
Yeah, fruit forward, jammy.
So I'm going to start using this. It's got a splash of fruit on it now.
Okay, yeah.
This is Australian
Splash
terms.
fruit. I like that. We like that. That sounds like an American term, but we'll claim that.
Okay.
I'll say that this weekend.
There you go. And this one actually kind of cracked me up when I saw it, and I didn't really know where the name came from, and didn't realize where it actually came from also. Yellowtail.
Yellowtail, yeah.
Yellowtail brand is named after the yellow-footed rock wallaby related to the kangaroos. Didn't know that.
Oh, didn't you?
I did not know that.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, if it's not Texas, it's in different countries.
Quite literally.
Quite literally, yes.
A lot of people think it's a kangaroo in the front of that label, and it's actually a wallaby.
I thought it was kangaroo too.
Yeah.
And this one here is kind of funny. Slang.
Slang.
Some Australian slang terms for wine includes plonk, which originally referred to the cheap fortified wines, but now means any cheap alcohol, aka ripper, which means the best wine of the evening.
Yeah. Well, when I was at university at Roseworthy College, there was a group. You actually got inducted into a group of esteemed people. And
I just
and our name was called the Plonkies. So that was the nickname. So anyway, Plonky, yeah, plonk. Great word for good booze.
Oh,
And it's a ripper.
Oh, sorry.
It's a ripper, not a ripper.
Sorry, I threw a Texas accent into it. And then wine labels. This is actually, we're talking about your labels and stuff. In the past, Australian wines with labels featuring indigenous, yes, that big word. I'm an IT guy, not a animals like kangaroos, dingoes, and lizards were considered easy drinking, fruit forward wines.
With a splash of fruit?
Yeah, they were the critter labels.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then, of course, a lot of winemakers know this, the screw caps. Australian winemakers started using screw caps instead of corks in the mid-'70s to prevent quality issues caused by corks. Screw caps are now used in 75% of all Australian wines.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. And
now you've done it.
Let me pop my sleeves.
No, we had a brief discussion over lunch about this, and it was really interesting because some of these older wineries that have been around for over 100 years, well over 100 years, 150 years in Australia, were the forefront of actually realising that, you know, we weren't getting good corks in Australia. And so in the early 70s, and in fact, I think actually in the 60s even, that a couple of these major wineries trialled screw caps and brought them to market in Australia, and it failed dismally because it was seen as a cheap wine. Right. You know, they didn't do their advertising properly. I've actually, and I'm sure Vanessa also, has tasted these wines. We've been into these cellars. We've recently tasted these wines. Remarkably great condition. Really? Fresh still. And side-by-side comparisons with the same vintage under screw cap and cork. And without a doubt, the wines under screw cap are just unbelievably fresh in comparison. And then we had that second bout of the screw cap in the late 90s when, you know, Australia were really getting poor corks from Europe, from Portugal. And so the Clare Valley winemakers got together and decided to release all of their Rieslings under screw cap in 1998.
Interesting.
And that was the turning point of a huge sort of change in how we closed our wines in Australia.
And, you know, and becoming a winemaker myself, you know, it's fascinating to sit and listen to different people and their opinions on screw cap versus cork. You know, with the cork, you still allow a little bit of oxygen in there, but it's over time. It's not just like all of a sudden. And then when you uncork it and you put it back in, you're still allowing that oxygen to stay inside there. But and this baffles me, okay? And so, and sometimes some things just baffle me. It's stupid to be baffled over it. But putting a screw cap back on, you're trapping that oxygen back inside there. So explain, you know, when you put that screw cap on, how is it releasing that oxygen out of it that stays in there? I mean, you're still allowing that oxygen in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, to best summarise this in my mind, my daughter came to me, Harriet, my daughter, she was going through her final year at high school and she had to do a project. And it was about 2012, I reckon, 2013 when she was doing this project. And she said, Dad, I want to do this project about cork and screw cap. And that, you know, her year, final year.
This is my daughter here.
And I said, Harriet, that's great, but look, the science has sort of been done on it. That's sort of rehashing stuff that's sort of, you know, been done and whatever. Why don't you do perception? Why don't you? And I gave her this list of winemakers, journalists, wine importers, distributors, restaurateurs, sommeliers from around the world. And I said, why don't you contact these guys and ask them about what they feel about it? And she wrote this project. Of course, she got 100% for it. It was a phenomenal project. Really? It was all about perception and where all these types of people in the industry thought how screw cap and cork fitted in, and it was great. And how it fell was screw cap, drink now, buy the glass, go for screw cap. If you want to cellar it and premiumise it, go for cork. That was the message globally.
That's okay. I like that idea. I actually, I don't know if y'all ever heard of the book called The $1 Billion Wine.
Haven't seen it.
No.
So this during Thomas Jefferson, when he was president of the United States, he had purchased a whole bunch of wine over in Europe, and a lot of them did not get shipped over here and ended up stayed in the cellars over there. Well, during World War II, the French was protecting all that wine, so they had built this fake wall up so the Nazis wouldn't steal all this wine. Well, the people who actually lived in that house died, and no one knew about it until the 80s when they uncovered it. And they actually discovered all these Thomas Jefferson wines from all these years. And what's fascinating is that he actually pulled that out, and they actually took it into a clean, oxygen-free room and recorked them.
Wow.
And then what really the sad thing about it is, as I was reading this book, the winery where he got them from, they were still in business. And they were having a dinner, and he walks in there like a child with this, showing it off and saying, look, this bottle right here, I paid $250,000 for this bottle right here. This was in the 85 when he bought it, okay? And as he's walking out, he tapped the corner of the wall,
Oh, you're kidding.
and shattered the glass.
Oh no!
Oh, that hurts me.
People were running over there, licking the fingers and licking the wine off there. I was like, yeah, go ahead and do that. There might be some glass in there too. Well, you know, it's fascinating, you know, when it talks about preserving your wine, when it comes to, you know, corks and screw caps, you know, there's a lot of huge debate on it. I mean, even me, I'm still not kind of sold on the screw caps because, I mean, once you open it, you've already introduced oxygen into it. When you close the cap back on it, the oxygen is still there. It doesn't come out. Now, when you start using like Corvins, on the other hand, where you're pumping argon back into it, food grade argon, that's a whole different ballpark right there. You're not oxidizing that wine anymore.
Yeah, I do all of this stuff. We've got a caravan. I got to be honest. I tend to see the argon influence in that bottle too. I mean, I'm acutely looking at my bottle of wine that I've tasted the grapes in the vineyard, you know, matured in barrel for 2 years. 2 years later in bottle, you know, I know this wine intimately, and subtle differences like cork interference, screw cap interferences, argon interferences, they can all interfere with the progression of a wine. There's no question.
Yeah.
And they all do it slightly differently.
Interesting.
Most of our wines are still or have always been under cork. I mean, our production is very oxidative. We have basket press. There's oxygen all over. Our pump overs are out at open pump overs. I mean, it sits in barrel for months, years. I think part of the beauty of wine is that it's still breathing in the bottle. And if you stop that, then you're almost interfering with that age and the development, the life. And that's the beauty of wine, that it's alive and it's ever changing. You taste this wine right now, you taste that same bottle tomorrow, that same bottle the day after, it's going to be different. It's alive. That's the whole idea with wine.
Yeah, I think the screw cap too, what I've seen and what's sort of changed my mind from working with cork from 1998 to about 2004, when I first then moved exclusively to screw cap, and then in 2013 moving gradually back into cork, I just noticed, and I wasn't convinced of the screw cap closing down the wine, shutting it down, and to Vanessa's point, just letting that wine breathe, and there is, there's papers written, there's evidence that, stuff done that, just the interaction of the tannin of the cork and the wine itself is actually leading to extra complexity. And I'm convinced that's the case, hence moving more, more and more back to cork too.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Paul, you've been quiet this whole thing here. Are you just kind of absorbing the conversation here?
I mean, I'm more just nodding my head because our portfolio, the wines that we do have under screw cap are mostly like our semi-dries, meant to be very refreshing, white wines, meant to be consumed within about 2 to 3 years. Okay. I would say the majority of our wines under screw cap. Most of our wines are under cork for a lot of the reasons that they're talking about. So yeah, I fully agree with that. I mean, I do think though that there is. I mean, by far the perception issue is the biggest thing that
Most
we
definitely
are challenged with.
Yeah.
One of the things that we were discussing at lunch as well is this interesting element when you're in distribution, there's a lot of places where you're serving your wines in a restaurant or bar where maybe the staff is not as comfortable with a cork, where the screw cap is an advantage because obviously it's very easy to open a screw cap. You don't need an opener. So there has been a demand and a request from certain levels of, I would say, on-premise accounts to have a screw cap as well. So that, and in some cases, they will give preference to products that have that. And we've seen that in the marketplace too. But a lot of that comes back to preference, usability, convenience. During COVID, we transitioned a few of our products because convenience was a big mindset. That's why we did cans. That's why we did screw caps and so forth. So.
Interesting. Do you know, Will, I might add, I mentioned to the guys at lunch earlier that I've got framed 1934 US wine and spirits, an advertisement for screw caps. Faster, better, cheaper.
Well, I don't know if we were fast back in the 1930s.
So it's been around for a long time.
Interesting. I like that idea. I like that you have that frame there. So before I go into the next question, Paul, what are we drinking right now?
So I just poured our 2022 Private Reserve Tempranillo. So this is actually a brand new release. We just released this, so it's still got a lot of really great fruit to it. What was the word that we were using?
Splash of fruit.
Tempranillo is a variety that has become well known in Texas. Really thrives in our environment. Once again, this is from the High Plains as well, from Buena Suerte Vineyards. It loves the sun. It loves the heat.
Yep.
It does well.
Well, and I'm glad you actually said that, because that was my next topic here. So we all know here in Texas, as Paul just said, Tempranillo grows great here in Texas. And in fact, anything that is a lot of sun, a lot of heat, it loves. So in Australia, what is y'all's like almost state, or for Texas it's called state, but what will be y'all's state or country grape that y'all will grow there?
Barossa Valley would have to be Shiraz, I guess. Yeah.
I think nationally Shiraz
Yeah.
is the guy.
Do I get a cuss here and say Syrah?
You can call it Shiraz.
You can call it whatever you want, as long as you drink it.
We'll spin off into that topic here in just a second, because I mean we're gonna have a debate on that one. I love that debate. So Shiraz is what y'all grow predominantly there in Australia.
Yes, but in our vineyard, we grow 11 different varieties of grapes. So we actually have Tempranillo as well. It grows quite happily. I mean, the Barossa Valley has a Mediterranean climate, so it's I guess a similar condition as it would grow in Rioja, and here I would imagine. We grow everything from Tempranillo, Shiraz, Cab, Merlot, Petit Syrah. Lots of similarities with you guys. Chardonnay, Viognier. We're very lucky in the Barossa. The conditions are very favorable. The soils are, very rich, so we're able to grow different things.
Interesting. So I know, correct me if I'm wrong, like right now you're actually in winter time or springtime right now.
Spring started September 1st.
Yeah. So y'all are now just starting in growing season right now. Okay. So for our listeners who have not been to Australia and don't know a lot about the terroir of Australia, kind of explain what y'all's terroir is compared to us. Because I'll say, like for Texas, if you try to compare Texas to California has a lot of heat during the daytime and it cools off at night. Texas has death and death. We don't have anything in between. So what is the terroir like there in Australia?
At this time of the year, I guess it can go from some days will be warmer than others, but the temperature definitely will drop at night without the sun. At this time of the year, and as the grapes start growing, or as the vines start growing and opening up and developing, frost starts becoming a bit of a worry. And as it's been getting a little bit colder, we've seen some frost damage in the last year or two in certain areas. At our vineyards, we're on a gully, so we're pretty lucky. Only the lowest parts of the certain blocks might get affected. And in the summer, it's very similar heat. It can be death heat. And sometimes, when we get those heat waves, it's death and death, nighttime, daytime. But most of the time it's hot summer days and evenings that are cooler as well. So it's similar.
So almost similar to what we have here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So one of the things I was going to say, and yes, I mean death and death, but in the High Plains, just because of the environment, the desert-like environment and the elevation, we do get 30 to 40 degree temperature shift at nighttime. So you can get pretty cool. Yeah. But yeah, when you come off the Cap Rock, it stays pretty warm. Yeah.
Well, when I went up for Labor Day weekend to Brownfield, it was like 80 degrees when I left here. I left at 2:00 in the morning and I got to Brownfield, West Texas, 5.5 hours. Got up at 2:00 in the morning just to go harvest grapes, by the way. Let's see my dedication there.
Yeah, well.
And then I drove back after harvest grapes. I got there and it was like 60 degrees. And I'm like, you can't argue with this. I'll harvest in this weather all day long if we have to, Yeah. And I sat and harvest. I started harvesting about 9 a.m. and I was done by 1. And the worst thing I had in that whole time, as I'm sitting there harvesting, and I hear this loud noise behind me, and I'm like, what on earth? And about that time I turn, and a big old dirt devil just sucks me up for a second. I got slapped in the face with a couple of leaves and a little small limb. I'm like, what the heck was that? And then finally when it passes through, I see it was a dirt devil, but it went right through the middle of me, right through the vineyard. And I was like, oh, I haven't seen one of those since I was a child. But it definitely was a different terroir, a different environment than what we have up here in North Texas. In fact, ironically enough, as I was walking through a lot of sand, and I was like, this is really nice. This is different than what I have been doing over here at the vineyard I've been working at. So what we were talking about, because I know you had to sneeze. We were talking about the terroir there in Australia compared to Texas, and we were talking about how here in Texas, California is hot at night, cool at day, and then Texas is death and death. There's no coolness in between it. And so Vanessa was just kind of explaining to us, what y'all have over there compared to what we have here.
Yeah, I think what makes Barossa Valley or Barossa just such a great place, why it is famous in the first place is because it has produced over decades, well over 100 years, 150, 60 years, it's produced quality wine. And part of that story is its diurnal fluctuation. It gets warm during the day, sunny, perfect. Grapes, vines love that. But at night time, it really does cool down, and particularly in that late summer, autumnal weather. And we have really cold mornings, actually. And so it takes a long time to get to that peak of the day. And then it sharply cools off again. And vines love this. They love that condition. The quality is magnificent. We retain acidity. And, we even get that, Oregon phrased that wonderful term of hang time. Well, we get that in the Barossa Valley too with the later ripening varieties when they're just sitting out in the autumnal sun. They're not really ripening, but they're just getting hang time.
Right.
It's that.
Developing the flavors.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. And I think that's, I like to call that laying out in the sun.
Yeah. And so for Oregon, it was Pinot Noir. It's Pinot Noir. Right. But for us, it's Grenache and Mourvèdre and later ripening varieties.
So what do you have grown in your vineyard?
We have Shiraz and Syrah. And we have Grenache and Mourvèdre and Muscat Blanc and Petit Gras.
Okay, repeat that one more time again.
Muscat Blanc, a Petit Gras. Muscat Blanc with small berries.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And
that's an ancient variety. It's been in the Barossa Valley for
Canelli?
I'm not sure what you guys call it, but it's the same as you'd make a Baume de Venise style wine. And in fact, it's grown all around the shores of the Mediterranean, from Spain,
interesting,
southern France, Italy, Greece, Croatia, into Turkey. It's grown throughout the Mediterranean.
I'm pretty sure. Sorry, I'm almost positive that's we grow it as Muscat Canelli.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Right. Okay.
But it does well in Texas.
So
too.
yeah, Cape Constantia, South Africa, same variety.
Okay.
Muscat Blanc. Yeah.
Interesting.
Beautiful.
Never heard of it before.
I had it we've got 170-year-old vines just sitting on our doorstep. It's magnificent.
Wow.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, there are wineries or vineyards over in California pulling up 100-year-old vines right now.
No way.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be doing it. Well, they're grafted though.
Well, I don't know. I do know what the reason why they're pulling it up is because their wine industry there is so saturated.
Too many.
And so they're changing over to doing something else.
Oh, okay.
And it's sad that they're pulling up 100-year-old vines. I would rather pull up 5-year-old vines than the 100-year-old vines.
Yeah.
I mean, those 100-year-old vines, they have characteristic built into them. They've been there through a lot of stuff. A lot of fires, a lot of different profiles changes over the years. That's just me. So one of the key things that I actually love to talk about, and I think it was on your website, I think it was, or maybe it was yours, sustainability.
Yes.
And one of the things maybe both of us.
Yeah.
It probably both.
Hopefully.
One of the things I was down in the hill country about a month or so ago, and I talked to 14 different wineries, and all of them all said that they're starting to incorporate one insect that I would never have thought about. and that was called the banjo or the praying mantis.
Oh, yes.
All right.
And I've never thought of a praying mantis being put into a vineyard to prevent from bugs. And actually, I was at the winery Portree there, and they had their vineyard right in front. And he said he was out harvesting. He said he got bit, and he thought it was a horsefly that bit him. Okay, horseflies here in Texas are like this big, and they bite. Okay, not really. They're about this big. They're pretty huge, and they bite. And he thought it was a horsefly that bit him, and he actually looked down, and it was a praying mantis on his arm that bit him.
I didn't realize they could bite.
I didn't either.
Would bite.
Must have been a big bug, you know. But so for Australia, what do y'all do for sustainability for y'all's vineyards?
Well, there's lots of different things. I would probably say for the vineyard, or well, in the winery, we have
just in general for everything.
Solar panels is probably one of the first things we did. We have about 700 solar panels, so the winery is all solar powered. We have electric vehicles that we do tours throughout the vineyard, so that also is solar powered by the energy that we get from the sun. In the vineyard, we have geese that come around and eat the weeds. We have blocks that we can block off and put sheep in there. Obviously, in the winter, you wouldn't do that when the vines start growing. We have a variety of things that.
It's solar energy. We've got a water recycling plant. Which is great. We collect the rainwater, use it to wash down, and then recycle that, and we're able to put it back. It's just this wonderful cycle. We've encouraged natural biodiversity by planting native trees and just creating areas for these animals to live in. I'm particularly proud of the fact that when I bought my property all those years ago, I think we had one species of bird, and now I reckon we've got 15. And not only that, last week I saw this new type of bird in there, and I took a photo, but I'm able to send it to my brother-in-law's father, he loves birds. And so I sent him these photos, and he just told me we've got the zebra finch in the vineyard. Nice. So I've never heard of a zebra finch.
Wow.
So anyway, it's incredible. So that's number 16. So I'm really proud of that, because just encouraging everything that's going on.
Right.
Also just encouraging encouraging the native grasses in the vineyard, and coupling that with an arid rye. We get the twofold of reflecting the red sunlight back into the red light back into the canopy of the vines, which is where the tannins.
Right.
That's how the vine. They use red light to make their tannins, and but also we're reducing with that green grass. We're reducing the temperature of the vineyard by 5 degrees.
Wow.
So
Nice.
there's all these things, and we're all doing it. In fact. I was talking to another winemaker in the Barossa just a few months ago, and we just sort of both commented how the valley has changed over the last 5 years. That everyone is on this, almost everyone.
You always got that one rebel,
Yeah,
Are you that rebel?
Unbelievable. No, I'm not. And it looks great. The place is the valley. The Barossa is just a great example of sustainability and where it's all heading. And it's so important, that we're all doing it.
Interesting.
For us, a big important thing in our winery and vineyard is the fact that we built the winery in the middle of the vineyard. So all the wines that we make are from the grapes surrounding. So when we harvest with an onboard destemmer. So as we're picking the grapes, all of the mog is going back into the vineyard, falling back onto the ground. Within minutes, it's like farm to plate. So within minutes, we've got the grapes that have been picked in the winery. And because the fermenters are lower, we literally just tip them into the fermenter. So there's no pumps, nothing. It's as quick as you can get a grape into a fermenter, and the process started. And then at the end, the grape mark, or the cakes, the press cake, the grapes at the end.
The dried skins?
Yeah, the dried skins, the seeds.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. we feed them to cows and sheep in the vineyards, in the paddocks.
Interesting.
So it's a full circle.
So with our pumice, we actually do a composting program. Which actually, so we'd always obviously heard good things about it, but 2 years ago we did a study with a gentleman who basically he's kind of like a wizard in composting, but he works with a analysis lab up in, I think it's Pennsylvania, and we actually found some really good data on grape as compost. It takes about 2 to 3 years to break down enough. But actually, it's a really good for soil material.
Really?
A little bit of nutrients, not a huge amount of nutrients back into the soil, but it's actually a great compost.
Interesting. See, this is what I like, because here we are coming together. We're drinking wine. We're talking about how we are better the environment, and what better way than doing that, by starting at the vineyard, It's fun to talk about this. We can sit and talk about this all day long. I know we have things we got to do also. So, so I have to ask. So, do y'all do a lot of hand harvest at y'all's vineyard, or do y'all mechanical?
We do some. This last year we had to pick our Tanat. So we have a few rows.
How do you say that again?
Tanat.
How we say it in Texas? Tanat?
Tanat, yeah.
Tanat. Sorry, Tanat. I don't know. So we handpicked that. There's a couple steep areas. We're on the way to Eden Valley, which is a little bit higher in elevation than Valley Floor. So we've got a pretty hilly location. So some of our vineyards are pretty steep, and some of the harvester drivers dare not turn on those rows. So we have to handpick those.
Interesting.
We've got very old vineyards that must be handpicked. They're too fragile for machine harvesters. And also they're untrellised. So, machine harvesters pretty well need a trellis. So we
you said untrellised?
Untrellised, yeah.
Okay. I think this is the first time I've heard of a vineyard having a no trellis vineyard.
Yeah. So the old school stuff.
The bush vine.
Would you call that head trained or
head trained?
Yeah.
You call it head trained. Yeah. We call it bush vine. Yeah.
Just stick it over here in the corner, let it grow on its own.
Wild and gnarly.
Yeah. So Grenache and Mourvedre are predisposed genetically to grow upright. So we don't like you look at those vineyards in the Southern Rhone. They don't have trellising systems.
Right.
You look at Syrah on the Hill of Hermitage. It's got a stake. If it didn't have that stake, it would grow on the ground,
right?
And it'd probably be rot. So over the centuries, the grape growers have worked out what needs to be trellised, and what needs a stake, and what needs and what can do without them. And we've got 100+ year old Grenache, Mourvedre. Semillon's another variety that doesn't need the trellis. So this is what I'm dealing with, not exclusively, but we have to handpick those.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we also handpick some of our trellis vineyards where we could run a machine down, but we handpick them because we want whole bunch ferment.
Right.
So we want the stalks, we want the stems in the ferment, fully ripe. The Barossa Valley, we have that sun that we've been talking about, that warmth. Our stalks are ripe. They're yellow and golden brown. You can eat them. You can chew them. They're not bitter and green.
Right.
And people think of a stalk as it's green and bitter. We can't use that. No, we can use that. And those tannins come into our wine in a beautifully subliminal way, and add complexity. So part of our strategy is definitely to handpick at least some percentage of these vineyards, depending on the season, but 100% with these old vines.
So I know that y'all get some of y'all's from West Texas, but y'all have y'all's own vineyard there in Bryan, right?
So we have a 20-acre vineyard in Bryan, 17 acres of Linois, 2 acres of Sagrantino, and 1 acre of Blanc de Bois, ish. The Blanc de Bois got nipped a few years ago in the freeze, so it's kind of recovering now. But that's all hand done. So everything there is hand picked, hand worked in terms of pruning and everything. But we, through partnerships in our own vineyards, farm about 700 acres statewide. So we have a small vineyard in the hill country. But most of our fruit comes from the high plains. And up there, most of things have been mechanized.
Right.
We will do hand picks from time to time. But man, the technology is so advanced now. I mean, the harvesters with all of the harvesters that we use have the onboard distemmers. The fruit, when it comes in, I mean, it looks like a basket of individually picked berries is what it looks like. I mean,
wow.
Which, if you go back 10 years, even, I mean, our industry, part of what's driving the innovation or the growth in Texas is the innovation of hail netting and like updated harvesting equipment and things like that. The ability to do some level of gross pruning mechanically, that is helping us out tremendously.
Sorry, how bad an issue is hail that you have to hail?
Pretty bad.
So used to be late frost was our biggest issue, but we now have frost control systems that make that better and proper pruning techniques to try to delay bud break. I would say the number one issue is hail.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
In fact, I will see, what was it? My first year that I went down to Fredericksburg, they had just had a big hailstorm down there. And one of the vineyards down there, it took out like 40, maybe 50% of their fruit.
Wow.
Yeah.
We had a weird hailstorm a couple of years ago, 5 minutes of hell. It was like the most bizarre. You remember 2022, October, end of October? I was taking my daughter to swim class and I came outside and it was like, it was horrible.
So
and it was white.
Here in Texas, we call it different sizes. So we got pea-size hail, and then we have golf ball size hail, and then we have baseball size hail, and then we have softball size hail, and then we have hell.
Jeez.
This year there was a hailstorm in hill country where literally there were hail balls that were this big, the size of grapefruits.
Holy cow.
Luckily, I have never seen that.
Let me tell you something. I do remember one day, was I in third grade? I think third grade. And in this school that I was going to was right across the street from my grandmother's house. And I remember walking out and all of a sudden you start seeing just little random drops of this white stuff falling out of the sky and you think it's snow, but you hear it hit the ground, it's like thud. And you're like, that doesn't sound right for snow. And about that time, I hear my teachers screaming for the kids to get back inside the building. Well, by that time, it's already too late, and it's starting to hail. I got tapped in the head, and I think that's probably what's wrong with me. Is I got hit in the head with a baseball-sized hail.
Ouch.
Yeah, wow. I had, for the longest time, I had like this twin head over here.
I remember driving back after that hailstorm because I had to stay in the swim area for a little while until it like melted off. But I drove back and we've planted orchards. We have like more than 200 different varieties of trees, of fruit trees, and a greenhouse. And that my father-in-law netted it all. And actually all of the nets held the hail and protected everything. So but we haven't had a need to net for hail. Yeah, it can be pretty bad around here. Yeah, knock on wood. Yes. So, one of the things that, all of us as vineyards have an issue with is with frost. And I know there's been a study going on right now where they've actually doing this, like this silicone encapsulation. So it protects the bud. It does a silicone encapsulation of the bud. It's biodegradable. So when the bud breaks and actually starts turning into fruit, it actually drops onto the ground. It's clear. You can't see it. It falls on the ground. It's biodegradable. Have y'all heard about that? No, I haven't. No. It sounds kind of like when they water over the top and then the water freezes on top of. Which, to me, when I think about that, when you water something and it freezes, it's going to freeze everything. But doing the studies on that, it's actually warmer in the center of that ice than it is outside. Yeah. I would have never thought that in a million years. Never thought that. It's pretty interesting. Yeah. I wonder who the person was like, you know what? I'm going to water this and it's going to protect it. Until it freezes on the right spot. Exactly.
There's also been study for spraying basically clay on the vines to help protect them as well. From not just that to try to delay bud break, but also potentially for drift issues that we have as well. Yeah, right. And that's probably one of the biggest things that we're dealing with right now is herbicidal
herbicidal drift right now.
Yeah.
That's a big ordeal right now. I don't know what is the biggest problem you're all dealing with down in Australia.
Oh, the last couple. Well, 23 was.
I mean, short of
mildews
weather.
and botrytis, but not weather.
Short of like diseases, because one of the biggest problems we're having here in Texas, and I'm not going to name any names because of what's happening with them, is that herbicidal drift is happening. So you can have Joe Blow over here in this property over here spray something, and it actually drifts over here on the vines and actually kills the vines.
Yeah, I think Barossa growers have, they're very considerate to each other, but also the Barossa is a low input. But, that's why, again, it's such a great place to grow grapes, because the climate itself, it's low input. It's warm, dry summers, wet, cold winters. Vines love it. So a need for sprays and chemicals in the vineyard is very, very low.
Okay.
Which is great.
Our issue is not vineyards, it's other agriculture. But
it's somebody else causing problems with us.
Ours is probably water.
Yeah, well, I think there might be some issue. Maybe you have really good neighbors, but neglect. Some vineyards are just left to neglect, and they don't do anything to protect their vineyard. So then that starts affecting the neighboring properties. And we make wine for other customers, and they buy grapes off other people, and those growers complain of the vineyard across the road having an issue and them not doing anything about it.
We're going to need you to clean your hedges over there, buddy.
One interesting thing because the water discussion is just going to continue to be a bigger and bigger issue. But actually, one of the interesting things about the Texas industry is because we're such a small crop compared to the other ag industries. And actually, when we've done, studies about our actual water efficiency and water utilization, I mean, we are way better than most everybody else in terms of row crops and so forth. So there's actually some strong arguments that you're starting to see continue to be. Most growers that grow grapes in the high plains used to grow other commodities, cotton, and so forth. And so that's going to continue to be, I think, a strong argument for grapes versus the other ones, because you're even seeing some limitations on the ability to use pivot systems, requirements of using underground irrigation instead of on top of. As those requirements come out more and more, you're going to see a
change of land use.
Well, and a major challenge with other agricultural groups.
Yeah. When I first started this journey of winemaking and growing vines, I actually planted 12 vines in my backyard in my house, Mourvedre, Grenache, and
Shiraz.
Yes. I'm looking at it right here, and it just went blank. And, growing up as a kid, we used to have a big, huge garden, and we would get tomatoes coming out, big boy steak tomatoes like this big around, zucchinis that would come out, this little big around, it's different stuff like that. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to harness this knowledge. We're going to try to do something here. So what I decided to do when I actually planted these vines is I actually put a soaker hose underground by the roots. So I planted the vines down. I got the roots in the ground. I put a little bit of soil on top of that, and then I put a soaker hose right on top of that. So they're right next to the roots. So they immediately got that water instead of dripping down and then hitting the ground and then having the chance to evaporate. I put it right in the ground. Man, I'm so proud of myself. I had the vines. Man, I was doing good. I mean, I was they weren't even 4 months old. They already having clusters growing on them. I'm having to go out there and clip them. I'm like, I'm really proud of this. I want to do something good. And so I started building a trellis around them to get them ready and stuff. And then about 2 months later, I got this little Great Pyrenees puppy. She's such a great little white dog. So beautiful, so innocent. And I let her go in the backyard and play. And I walked out there, and she had a vine in her mouth. And I'm like, I am going to kill you, dog. I've been wanting to take her to the vineyard so bad, but I'm afraid that if I take her out there, she's going to get hold of somebody else's vines. And I'm like, yeah, she will end up dying not by my hands, though. So. But I will say, when I did that, I put that soaker hose down there. I would turn the water on until it actually started soaking through the soil. Yeah. And then I would turn it off, and that's all the water it got. And they were just going crazy. And I know that is almost unfeasible to do in a large vineyard style. I mean, that's just a lot of stuff.
Well, in many ways, we're progressively vineyards are turning to the drip, had drip irrigation, but then mulching on top of that drip line, which is not dissimilar to your underground circos.
Yeah.
So this is where it's you are the forefront. You are like,
Ahead of your time.
Thank you.
No, I mean, in the high plains, actually, a lot of vineyards have underground drip. Like
Really?
that. Yeah. So basically, same idea. Just they pre-lay it when they plant the
Right.
vineyard.
See that? And
Will's water, we call it.
what you call it?
Will's water.
Yeah. That's great. I like that.
Unless you have gophers. That's a
Oh
problem.
man, we're not going to talk about Caddyshack there.
We have a couple of blocks that are actually have natural springs underneath that haven't had to get any water. Our Merlot just grows like we didn't water it at all last year, and it was a very dry
Interesting.
summer. And just this year has been extremely dry, and we were digging just. While I was away, they were digging in one of the blocks, and it's quite wet, and it hasn't gotten any irrigation. So, yeah.
So we have locations in the Barossa that exactly you know some the soil types, the terroir demands watering, but others do not, and we've got exactly the same. We have a couple of vineyards.
Interesting.
Just we don't water. We don't need to.
Interesting.
He said in winter we put our wastewater on there.
Right.
And that's great. We've got to put the wastewater somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's all it gets.
Huh. Well, I know my folks live out in East Texas, and they've actually got really great soil. I'm kind of jealous about it, but the first probably about 6 to 8 inches of it, it's sandy, and then right underneath it's all clay, and then right underneath the clay, if you can punch through that clay, it's all water tables. Like I was out there digging. We digged a 12-inch hole to see, how long it'll take the water to drain out of it, because we need to figure out kind of stuff because we want to plant a vineyard out there. They got 5 acres they're not doing anything with. It's been a jungle right now. So why not? Let's do a vineyard. And so we dug our hole, we poured water into it, see how long it drained. And it took it about 8 to 10 hours to drain all the water out of it. And then my stepdad says, I'm actually surprised it drained that fast. I'm like, why is that? He goes, well, because we have 3 water tables literally sitting under this property right here. So I was like, do you know what the salination of the water is? I mean, which one is not so salty? Which one is? He goes, we actually do that. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, come with me. Walked over here on the side of the property, and he had a well already sitting up there. They actually pull water from out that hits all 3 tables.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what are you doing with this here? He goes, well, living out here in the country, there's been a couple of times where water got cut off. And we needed water. So we would come out here and we'll just pell the water out of this well. And I'm like, interesting. So,
he's probably got a license. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, you actually talked about earlier, we was talking about sustainability, and you was talking about collecting rainwater. So here in Texas, you have to have a permit to collect rainwater.
In our house, we don't have any city water. We're only on rainwater. So when it's dry like this, it can get a bit.
But do you have to have a permit to get it?
No, I don't think so. I don't have a permit.
No, not to collect rainwater. No,
it's free.
In Texas, you have to.
Yeah, wow.
They make it pretty challenging.
Yeah, I mean,
we collect rainwater at the estate.
You do?
But we are highly limited as to what we can use it for.
Okay.
Without like a very extensive treatment
Wow.
setup.
Yeah. See, and I didn't know that. And how I actually found out about this was by accident. There's a distillery down the road right here, and they use rainwater to collect to make their spirits. And the pipe was actually different color than the rest of the pipe, and it was purple. And I think it was purple. And I said, why is that pipe different color than the rest of the pipe? He goes, oh, that's our rain collection system right there that we get, and then we actually filter it out a little bit before we add it to our spirits. And then he go on to say that they had to have a permit to collect rainwater, and I'm like,
wow,
that just doesn't make sense.
No, well, in Australia, there's no problem. You put a rainwater tank in, you can take
yours.
Drink it, bathe in it, drink it.
Charge somebody else for it, huh?
Yeah,
we do have licenses for our bores, and that does get like the Barossa Australia does test it for you.
You said bores?
Our wells.
Oh, okay. I was like,
Which is
okay. I thought you,
for
when you said
irrigation.
bores, I was like, you got to have a license for your pigs.
No.
you were talking about having the well. We've got some vineyards. I've got a really old well on by the house, and then we have vineyards and then the river, and so you can see the water table of the well where the well is, and you can see that where the river is, and the vineyards in between, and we know those vines have their roots in the water.
Yeah.
And that's the ones we don't need to irrigate. Yeah. It's magnificent. And there's beautiful expression in the south of France where the grape, the best grapes grow, where they're head in sun, feet in water. But they say it in French.
Interesting. I like
and isn't that what Mataro Movedra loves? Wet feet? Loves wet feet.
Oh, man.
Absolutely.
Head in sun, feet in water.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Well, we're coming to the end of our show here, and it's been an honor speaking with all three of y'all here. It's just fascinating to listen to the way that grape growing, no matter what part of the world you're in, it's almost identical. I mean, there's a few variations going on there. If you had to say one thing about your Australian grape growing and winemaking that you had to really sum it up in maybe, let's say, one sentence or two sentences, how would you say that?
I'll let Dean go first.
And then I'm going to go ahead and add this for Texas for you, Paul. How would you say it compared to the Australian stuff?
Well, a nod to the old world with new world progression.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I don't need
how many sentences?
I mean, 1 to 2, 3. I mean, how long do we have back there?
I guess it's respect for tradition with some new ideas and an open mind, and trying to make the best of what we have and learn, continue to learn.
I think I think that the pioneering spirit is such a powerful thing with the Texas industry. I think being innovative and looking at the example provided by other regions, but at the same time being comfortable with defining our own style from the types of fruit that's produced here in the state, probably.
Interesting. Yeah. I like that insight. I really do. I want to thank y'all for allowing me to sit down and talk with y'all. I know y'all are in for Grape Fest, and we're going to have a great time this weekend. I will be seeing y'all because I'll be walking around.
Looking forward to seeing you, Will.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to sneak up on y'all.
Good.
I'm a part-time ninja also. Well, before we wrap this all up, I actually will give a couple of hits on our sponsors, and then we'll always do, at the end of our episodes, some wine quotes. Usually sometimes they're thought-provoking. Sorry, I've only had one glass of wine, promise. Sometimes they're funny. These are actually kind of, serious type quotes. But real quick, I want to give thanks to our sponsor of Texas Wine Lover app. They actually show all the wineries in Texas. They allow us to go out there, and if you need to find a wine, you want to filter out for specific wines or food or anything like that, you can get on that app and you can find any winery in Texas using that app. You can get on your desktop and use it, and then transfer it to your phone and use GPS to get to that location. And then one of my favorite ones, and thanks to this company here, Fly with Wine, they brought me back some Hewitson Shiraz wine.
Woohoo.
Yeah, and I have yet to open that. I'll probably open that tonight sometime.
I think you should.
and their quote is solving the wine shipping problems and dilemmas. I mean, come on, So here's our wine quotes for this episode. And this one's from Ernest Hemingway. It's better to have loved and lost than to live the rest of your life sober. I did like that one. And this one here, I can't even pronounce this guy's name, but the quote was so good. It's Charlie Caberson.
Sure.
Yeah. So you don't need to have a big business to make a good wine, but when you buy a bottle, you're not just buying wine. You're also buying the landscape, the history behind that wine. You have to look at the bottle in these 3 dimensions. I thought it was great for what we're all doing here.
Yeah.
So
That's great.
Guys, Dean, Paul, Vanessa, thank you again for allowing me to have the time with y'all to sit here and talk about this. This is Will with We Know Texas Vino. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Will.